Here we are for the second episode of Dualistic Unity Social. We are putting this one before the call-in show today, hoping that we can gather some people, some voices, maybe some opinions, and some some different opinions, perhaps some disagreements, because Andrew just unleashed one of his God videos on Instagram, so I imagine this is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, everyone who could join us. We really appreciate you being here. Again, after this is the call-in show, so definitely join us if you can.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The God videos are always fun. I felt like with this one I made some pretty logical points. I was happy with myself, and it really was from a spot of the benefits of not believing surrounding, in order to believe in God, you got to think. In order to believe that God is the truth, Sky Daddy is the truth, you got to believe that your thoughts are the truth. And all that belief does is reinforce that your thoughts are the truth, which they never are, which is funny. Like the irony that believing thoughts are the truth is the experience of hell. And so believing in God reinforces the experience of hell. And so in order to believe in God, you got to think. So without so much thought and not believing that thoughts are the truth, it's really, really hard to hold on to a belief tightly. Like, and then you start seeing God a little bit more here and now as fucking everything, because God is everything and everywhere, which includes you. But I'm hoping that's why I wanted to get that out before we got on here, because hoping it'll drum up some angry people. But when we do have them, we've gotten what one or two people so far who were angry with us on the call-in show. It's tough to get people on because they feel great in the comment section. The keyboard warriors going crazy in the comments. And then we're like, hey, actually, we're super available like all the time. We do live streaming, we do lives on social media, we're on Twitch, we have group chats, we have free group chats, we have public group chats. So we're nothing but available. So if you want to dispute us, if you want to debate us, come on, let's chat. We're not standing on any beliefs or holding on to anything. We're just recognizing that the only thing that you can actually confirm, that you can actually know, is that you exist here and now. That's the extent of it. That is the extent of my quote unquote belief system, which isn't so much a belief as it is a recognition. So yeah, we'll see what that drums up, but I'm hoping for at least someone to have the courage to hop on, because I was DMing someone earlier today and they were angry about things. I actually posted one of the DMs on my Instagram story in regards to the retreat. They were like, do you ever talk about the Lord? And I was like, no, we prefer to stick to what's actually real as opposed to discussing fictions. And went back and forth with them for a little, and I was like, hey, we actually have a call-in show today, so if you're really mad at us, you can join us, you can chat, you can share your grievances and all the horrible things you think we're doing. We're happy to do so. We're happy to have the discussion. But of course they were like, oh, I get shy on camera and blah blah blah. And it's like, all right, so you didn't actually want to have a conversation, you just wanted to utilize your point to continue to try and feel better. And I don't know, it's kind of a bummer. Like, we would love to get a Christian or a hardcore believer on the call-in show, because I think it would be a fun time and fun to watch.
Fun, in quotes. Absolutely. Challenging and insightful. You get to learn from it. I mean, that is ultimately the point of having these conversations at the end of the day, especially if you're not trying to be right. Then it's really just an opportunity to grow. And if the other person sees it that way as well, it's incredible how much can actually get done. It's funny because we were talking about this, and often Christianity or certain types of Christians will go on and on about the devil and how you got to watch out for the influences of the devil as the ultimate liar, the prince of lies, blah, blah, blah. Be careful. The devil's always out to turn you towards sin. And of course, that often comes from, a lot of it has been misinterpreted and kind of made out to be something it's not. And thanks to like Dante's Inferno and all that other stuff when it comes to our depiction of the devil. But often when we're talking about Satan or the Satan, we're talking about the book of Job, which is just the adversary, just the counter argument to God's will, if you were. And so it's always basically just turning us away from the recognition of unification, the recognition of unity. So the adversary to God's will is the illusion of division, ultimately at the end of the day. And so it's funny to me that Christians, always on the lookout for Satan, never see that it's their religion, that it's their religion that's actually reinforcing identity and division and fear, assumption, all of these things that create God into this fictional idea that has to be appeased, that has to be lived up to, that has to be worshipped, that has oddly human characteristics and needs, and it drives us apart as a result. So I find it really funny that the adversary to God is actually religion.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's interesting how all of this stuff and everything if and for anyone listening and who believes, Jesus is your Lord and Savior, like, there was a lot of things that he said that were kept out of the Bible because it didn't fit the church's narrative. Like, if you actually wanna hear some stuff, some quotes from Jesus, which none of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are quotes. They're those dudes' interpretation of the stories that Jesus told that were all symbolic. They were all he spoke in parables and whatnot, and it was never literal. And he would say things like the Father in regards to the whole, like the entirety of what reality is. And it's kind of funny that we took that as literally like that's his dad. Like, because when you see what he was talking about, the recognition of not being disconnected from reality, but there's still the experience of being disconnected. It's the Father and the Son, the Father, the whole, the Son being the perception of division. And so that's all he was ever talking about. So he was talking about, being here now, like the present moment. And so if you're interested in hearing quotes from him, check out Gospel of Thomas, because that's actually what he said. And people, we've had conversations with people who are like, "Oh, well, that one's made up." It's like, of course, that's very convenient to think that, and as opposed to actually digging into it and reading about it and remaining curious about it, because people don't stay curious. They don't want to find out what any of it is actually pointing to. They just want to believe that there's some fictitious dad looking over them and judging them from time to time, but like really having your best interest at heart. And as long as you believe in it, you get to when you die, you get to go to the pearly gates and hang out with him for the rest of your life, as opposed to actually have the experience of eternal life when you recognize that you're not divided at all from reality, that you are life itself. You are not something separate. And our ideas that we hold on to are the things that allow us to feel like we're separate when we take them to be the truth, when we take those thoughts to be the truth. Because without thoughts, without taking your mind so goddamn seriously, there isn't so much division to be perceived. You can still see things as they are and have the experience of division, but there's not quite so much weight. And that's all that Jesus was ever really talking about. And so it's yeah, it's interesting just how misinterpreted all of it has gotten and how convoluted and how literally backwards it's become. Like everything he was saying was taken and turned into a belief system, was believed in. Christianity came about like hundreds of years after Jesus died, and it was everything he spoke against was believing in things, worshiping things. Like if he came back and saw that one, people were worshiping him, and two, saw that he was, his death and how traumatic that was just all over the world, he'd be like, "What the fuck? What the fuck is going on?" He'd be probably so confused. So yeah, anyway, people wonder why we harp on religion so much. It's like because it's a massive component of our society. And it's something that does a great job of reinforcing the perception of division. So, of course, it's going to be a topic when we're talking about things like even just mental health, like believing that your thoughts are the truth, your idea of yourself is the truth of what you are, leads to a lot of mental health issues. So, anything that reinforces that idea to be the truth, including your belief in God, your idea of God to be the truth, is going to hurt and be very destructive in regards to your mental health. So it's imperative to keep this in conversation. As taboo as it seems in our society right now, it is a massive component to, I think, the mental health sort of epidemic that we're going through. It's something that reinforces it.
I would say absolutely. We mentioned the Gospel of Thomas, and what I love about the Gospel of Thomas is that it really does take away a lot of the fiction, the myth. Jesus having superpowers or him being zombie Jesus or any of those things. And so this quote, and it's been rotating on the bottom of the screen for the last little bit here, is from the Gospel of Thomas, and I love how telling this is in terms of his mentality. His disciples questioned him and said to him, "Do you want us to fast? How shall we pray? Shall we give alms? What diet shall we observe?" And Jesus said, "Don't tell lies, and do not do what you hate, for all things are plain in the sight of heaven." Because all things are obvious in moments of clarity, of responsible awareness, is what he's saying, which is the experience of heaven, unity. Um, for nothing hidden will not become manifest, and nothing covered will remain being uncovered without being uncovered. And what he's saying is that all that stuff you're avoiding, it comes out in your life. All those things you don't want to look at, all those things that the reasons that you're lying, the reasons that you're keeping things from people, the reasons that you're keeping things from yourself, the reasons that you limit yourself, all of that stuff. In a moment of self-responsible clarity, you're like, oh my God, I've been adding so much to my life. And that's the point, is that if you don't want to have that moment where you realize how much you've added, just don't add. Just don't add, and things will start to shed themselves away, and you will become closer and closer and closer to the experience of unity that you have never left. That you have never left. But you'll notice none of what he's saying there has anything to do with belief. They're like, what do we do? Who do we appease? How do we appease that person? He's like, just don't lie and don't do things you hate.
Yeah. It's funny how simple and basic it is when you put it like that, and it's turned into this whole thing that is so far from the reality of just the experience of being free of what you think is the truth, because it's never ever that. And even so, like, regardless of religion and belief and your idea of God and all of that stuff, like, it comes down to just thoughts, like believing that thoughts are in any way, shape, or form a component of the truth. And anything that reinforces that is going to reinforce the suffering that you experience at the hand of believing that those thoughts are the truth. And so when they come up, the moment you can recognize, oh yeah, that's not actually it. That's not actually the truth. That never actually will be the truth, is the moment that that weight falls off at least a bit. Like there's been a number of times in the last week, 2 weeks or so, I've been talking about it on the podcast, where I've just get sort of caught in a thought pattern. And as soon as I recognize, like, oh yeah, thoughts are always bullshit, thoughts are always fucked, it falls off pretty quick. But we can get caught in a thought pattern and then try and think our way out of it. Try and think our way out of the experience of, you know, the suffering that we're going through at the hand of those thoughts. And a lot of people exist for their entire life believing that thoughts could possibly, in some way, shape, or form, be the truth. And they're not. They never ever are. And I've had the discussion with people where they're like, well, if everything is reality, then thoughts are reality too. And again, they're components of it, but your thoughts are about a thing that exists in reality. And that thing that exists in reality is not based off of those thoughts. Your thought about the thing that exists in reality is not the thing that exists in reality. The Krishnamurti quote, the description is not the described. Like, it's such a vital thing to recognize that we've lost track of. Like, we actually think that our thought of the thing, our idea of ourself, is us, when it isn't. Our idea of the situation is exactly how the situation is going. Our idea of what someone else thinks of us is how they think of us. It's not. It never ever is. You can't actually know with absolute certainty yourself conceptually. You can't know someone else, even someone you're very close with, say a friend or a sibling or a parent or a relative. You have an idea of them. That idea of them is not them. It's not them, and it never will be. It can't be, because it's just an idea, and they're not an idea, and nothing is an idea. It's just what we try and focus on in order to find some degree of certainty, but it doesn't exist. And so, yeah, it's a very, very vital thing to understand that the description is not the described. Your idea of the thing is not the thing, and it never will be.
Yeah, but that's uncomfortable, right? That means that I can never say that I truly know anything. And that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to say we know. I mean, this is something that people will often say. We had somebody leave a comment to your video about judgment the other day and actually say straight up, "Nope, I know exactly who a person is." Wow, like that is some extreme cognitive dissonance. That is a lot of discomfort that's being avoided, and it's just because it's impossible. It's impossible for you to say you absolutely know who a person is. That completely disregards our capacity to change, our capacity to learn, our capacity to adapt from moment to moment, or based on our environment, or just to redeem ourselves, right? Like if that were the case, nobody would ever change. There'd be no point to psychology, there'd be no point to anything, right? And so that's it. It's just, you don't know, you can't know, because everybody is just as infinitely expressive and can create as much as you can. Everybody has the same potential to change as you do. Often we want to say that other people can't change because we don't think we can either, right? So there's that. But the fact is that we just don't want to admit we don't know, because there's a certain degree of uncertainty there. And this is the reason a lot of us have ideas in terms of like trust and faith. Like you'll notice, oh, I know my friend's going to act this way. My friend wouldn't act that way. I trust them. And that's just expectation. But ultimately, that expectation is just so you can feel more secure. So you don't have to act without awareness that that person may do something unexpected. And then when they do, you act all affronted, like, oh my God, I can't believe you've done this, that you betrayed my trust. And it's like, you mean didn't live up to your expectations, which they may not even know. Right. So it's unreasonable. But it always comes down to, again, that cognitive dissonance. When we feel discomfort, our brain immediately gets to work on getting rid of that discomfort, in the same way that when we're hungry, our brain's like, where do we find food? Right. Well, when all of a sudden you're feeling really anxious, your brain's like, how do we feel more certain? And it doesn't matter what it is. If you are desperate enough to get rid of that anxiety, you will glom onto anything that gives you just a brief cessation of that suffering, a brief cessation of that discomfort. And that's the danger, is it grabbing onto that thing, because what you're doing is you're just building a crutch rather than looking anxiety in the face and going, right, you come from me. You can't be stronger than me.
Exactly. And when it comes to our ideas of people, even like if you take a second to think about it logically, like you maintain an idea, say, of your friend, and say you haven't seen that person in, or not even a friend, just like a random person, and you think they're a dick. You think they're a piece of shit, and they're just not very kind, and you haven't seen them in a year. Like, who's to say that over this year they haven't completely changed? They haven't done a number of nice things. They totally have shifted their perspective. They see the world in a completely different way. And you're still maintaining, if someone asks them, if someone asked you about them, you would say, oh, yeah, that person's, oh, they're a piece of shit. It's like, just based off of a few interactions that you had with them. And then you maintain that idea despite them not fitting that idea at all. Or even in general, like they seem like a super nice person all the time. And then you have one interaction with them and they're a dick because they were going through something. And then that's your entire idea of them, is just that little blip of that experience. And so it's important to recognize that that is not the entirety of them ever. Like any idea that you hold on to is just based on your perception. And someone could do something that is perceived on entirely different ends of the spectrum by different people. Someone could see someone doing something, they're like, "Oh, that was a dick," because it hurt their feelings in the moment, but really they were looking out for them in the long term. And then years later, they're like, "Oh yeah, they actually had my best interest in mind." And so even in a singular interaction, there can be an infinite number of perspectives, and none of them are it. They're all just perceptions based on, usually it's almost always based on how comfortable or uncomfortable they make you feel. And, we actually say things like, "Oh, they're a good person. Oh, they're a bad person." Like, that's the most fucking asinine thing you can ever settle upon. This idea that people exist in objectivity and you know exactly what they are. Like, that your opinion of them is the absolute truth of what they are. Like, it's madness when you put it in that context, when you understand how absurd it is to try and do that. But that's the mechanism of our mind. That's the mechanism of our brain. We try and find that certainty. We do everything to find the certainty in an inherently uncertain reality. So it's interesting how often we continue to do that. And it's very important just to recognize that no matter what opinion you have of someone or something or a situation, it's never actually what it is. And we have some comments in here. I got one.
We
You
do. I
cool?
have one
Okay,
one
cool.
specifically I want to address. How do you view human experience in your unity worldview? We might be a unity, as you say, but how does that affect human experience? Because we still experience things as being separate. So here's the thing: how much of the separation that you perceive is just based on you making it worse? And what I mean is that when you run into someone and you have an idea about them, you have an image of who they are, you make assumptions based on your view of yourself, and you go through all that, you are doing that all based on this idea that they're separate from you. And often you'll actually, I guess, lack empathy because of that perceived division. Now, we experience division, that doesn't mean it's there. So what Andrew and I are often saying isn't that you're not human. It's just that being human doesn't mean you're separate from everyone else, that you don't actually get the luxury of assuming that being self-centered doesn't have any impact on anyone else, because it's all you. It's all connected. There is no division between any of us. We are all impacted by each other. We all mirror one another's growth. And so it doesn't change the human experience. It just means that I don't get all caught up in assumptions that are based on the illusion of division. In other words, I don't assume that your experience of being human is any different than my experience of being human, right? It doesn't matter how you identify, doesn't matter how you look, doesn't matter how you dress, it doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form. The same is true for everything else. Everything else is experiencing awareness on one level or another, and it's expressing itself as it can. Now, the more I understand about myself and the more I get beyond my idea of who I am, the more I can empathize with everything else as well. And so, to answer your question, it makes me just as human as you. It just increases one's sensitivity, one's level of empathy, one's ability to be more reasonable. It makes you a bit more patient. It makes you a little less afraid of everything because, of course, most of your fears are all based on assumptions, which are based on that perception of division. So that's all. It's not like all of a sudden you're moving to a new plane of existence. You're just getting more out of this one.
Yeah, and even the question, it's funny because that was the one that I had uh, gotten to on in these comments down here. But it's kind of like an ear asking the nose how its bodily worldview, its unity worldview, the recognition that it's the body impacts its thing. Like, oh, you have the experience of being an ear. Like, how does this view this? And even people think it's like a belief, the recognition of unity, and it's not. It's just as if an ear were to recognize that it was the entire body. And then the nose is like, how does this impact your experience? And thinking then that it's so different because its function is different, and then judging it because it doesn't look like it. Like, if it thinks that the entirety of itself is the nose, as opposed to understanding the function of itself, and it sees an ear, it's either going to have an idea, if it thinks that it shouldn't be a nose, that the ear is better than it and it's less, or it's going to judge the ear so it can feel better. And it's like, oh, you only have one hole, I have two holes. And so, therefore I'm better than you. And it's like, yeah, but I hear things, you smell things. Like, there's a different functionality there, but it doesn't take anything away from the fact that they're both still the body. That's all that this recognition is the recognition that your reality, I'm reality, interacting with itself. Exactly. Division is just a perception. It's as if, two fingers looking at each other. Like, oh, you're the left finger and I'm the right finger. We're divided. We're not the same. And they don't recognize that they aren't. at all in any way, shape, or form. And so that's all that it is say a conversation between cells in the body recognizing, oh shit, I'm not just what I think I am. I'm not just this limited perspective. I'm not just this cut off thing that's separate from everything else. I'm the entire body. And so it's not to say that it doesn't change the experience of being the cell and that experience that it has, but it completely shifts its perspective of itself, its perspective of everyone else, can more easily see itself and everything else because it recognizes that it is everything else. There is no thing that is separate from anything in all of reality. And our thoughts, our mind is the thing that allows us to perceive that division, which allows us to have an experience, which is amazing. Like it's a fucking incredible thing, but it doesn't mean that it's the truth. So with recognizing that it's not the truth, you don't have to have so much weight involved in each and every situation. Like things aren't the quite as serious as maybe they were. You take things a little more lightly, but you also experience a lot more empathy because you can very easily see yourself in everyone and more easily sometimes than others, but you can recognize that if you had had the experiences that they did, that you would act exactly as they would. And if they had the experiences that you had, they would act exactly as you do. And so there's a lot more to the situation that we're going through, the reality that we all are, than we perceive. And we cut ourselves off from the depth of that experience through perceiving division, taking that division that we perceive to be the truth, through believing that our thoughts are the truth, which is the only thing that allows us to perceive division. We label something, we name something, we have an idea of something that doesn't match our idea of ourself. But as you chip away at the idea of yourself, recognize that, oh, you can't conceptually know yourself. That idea of you is just as much not you as your idea of someone else is not them. And your idea of water isn't the water that you drink. It's all intertwined, all of those recognitions. So anything that reinforces the belief that thoughts are truth is going to reinforce that perception of division, is going to reinforce the suffering that comes with it, is going to reinforce the entire experience that you believe to be true that isn't quite so much. And it's all because you're believing that your thoughts are in any way, shape, or form the truth.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're going to play around with this for a little bit. There is somebody in the comment section, or somebody who is watching or even listening to this, who is currently on psychedelics, and so I just wanted to address that person very quickly and say thank you, in fact, for informing everything that we're doing, because of course you are the all of everything. If you weren't here, would anything else be? And do you know for sure? And the answer is way more complex because, of course, what do I mean by you? Do I mean your idea of yourself, or do I mean what you really are, which is the all of reality? There is no division. So you are the same me that I am, and Andrew is, and everybody else is, and you've done nothing but create ripples in your entire life. And it's funny, we really do disregard that. And what I mean is that you'll go to the grocery store, for example, Andrew, or anybody else here. You'll go to the grocery store, you will pick up a fruit that has come halfway across the world. You will pick up a can that has been gathered from numerous different places to either make the can, fill the can, put the stuff in the can. And all of these things have caused ripple upon ripple upon ripple upon ripple, not even recognizing that's the fact. Let's just say you go and you buy a fruit at a vegetable. Somebody picked that fruit. Somebody put that fruit in a box. Somebody dragged that box onto a truck. Somebody drove that truck to somewhere else where that fruit was then interacted with other people to eventually become whatever it is that you just bought. But there were so many people interacting and making ripples throughout that process that the fruit itself is evidence that we are not divided. Every single thing you've done in your entire life has rippled out from one person to the next, to the next, to the next, right down to when you were first born. How many of us have been having kind of a shitty day? We run across a cute baby on the subway or waiting in line or something, and the baby's smiling at us and it's waving. And all of a sudden, our shitty day kind of seems a little less serious. Then we go on to meet other people in that day and we make their shitty day less serious. And it was all because of some innocent baby waving at us. We are making ripples all the time. We have no way of knowing what ripples that we're making, but we are. And we have, or rather, we make the mistake of thinking that when we say ripples, it's ripples connecting with something else. It's just ripples within yourself. In the same way that your blood flows within your body, we are all molecules flowing within your larger body. It's just that we've gotten into the habit of looking at ourselves as only the cell rather than an extension of the awareness that drives the entire body.
Yeah, and one of the biggest beauties of that recognition is that you never know what the impact is gonna be. Like, the ripples don't end, ever, and you never actually know what the extent of them will be, what the actual impact will be. Like, we go through a situation, we immediately judge it. I've been catching myself when I say "we" now because it's, like, based on my experience, like, I'll go through a specific situation and judge it and think of it in a certain way. "Oh, that went well. Oh, that went poorly." I don't fucking know. I can't fucking know. I can have no idea whatsoever. You go through a situation, you think it goes terribly, you don't know what the actual impact of that situation will be. You know, say you post on social media, you post a video, and like it doesn't get as many views as you thought it was going to get, and you're like, oh, that didn't do that great. But little do you know, it someone who someone comes across it, just one of the people who comes across it is someone you've been wanting to get on your podcast for a while. This is a close to home example. And then, you know, they reach out to you and they're like, "I love this video." And then you get them on their podcast, you start doing business together. And then you you know, you work together and then you know, it leads to a bunch of things and a whole situation. And meanwhile, you had posted a certain video and it was like this little thing and you were like, "Oh, that's just that." And it led to this whole entire thing. Or, you know, you smile to someone walking down the street. You ask a cashier at the grocery store how their day's going and they were having a shitty day. They were like really, really in the depths of shit. They think that no one ever sees them, no one ever thinks anything highly of them, and here you are, you ask how their day is, they're like, not great," and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I've totally been there, blah, blah, blah." It goes on, and it completely changes the trajectory of their life. They go on to interact with more people, they, you know, do some crazy stuff with their life, and that was the turning point right there. Meanwhile, say you were at the grocery store in that situation and you weren't feeling great and you still had the chat with the person, had that impact, you leave, you don't think twice about it. And you just made a massive impact on reality that will echo in eternity. And you never actually know what that'll be. You don't know one way or the other. Sometimes, you know, down the road, you find out someone's like, "Oh, remember that day, whatever, whatever." And, or you hear them talking about a story where they interacted with this random person. You're like, wait, I think that was me. And here you were thinking nothing of it whatsoever. Like we can't know the impacts of anything that we're having. And because we conceptualize everything, especially situations, we don't understand that we can't know the impact of that situation. But we label stuff as good or bad. Oh, positive or negative. Oh, this was helpful, this was harmful. And we can never know the reality of it. So when you let go of trying to know, you just keep paying attention and there's less suffering that comes along with it because the suffering stems from thinking that you're wrong. Like something about you is wrong that you're trying to fix, or something that you did was wrong and shouldn't have happened, or something you said, you know, didn't resonate as well as you thought. And it's all of these things that we settle upon a certainty that this didn't go as well, or there's something wrong with me and I have to fix it. And all this shit. And that's what leads to our suffering is the settling upon the certainty because we don't the alternative is uncomfortable. The uncertainty, the inherent uncertainty of everything in reality, every situation that we go through is entirely uncertain. We can never know it. We can never know if something went well or went poorly. Ever. Like for your whole life, you can't know. You may gain more context the more you pay attention and understand, you know, a broader scope of what's happening, but it's still not knowing in the conceptual way. And so once you let go of trying to know, you just keep being free, kind of floating through reality in a sense, and absolutely get caught up in judging things. But even those, you still don't know.
It's so interesting because we try to know, we want to know about everything around us, what's going to happen, where it's going, what it means, blah, blah, blah. And if we were to surrender all of that, what we're left with is just self knowledge, which is where's it all coming from? Rather than focusing on where the ripple's going, where is it originating? What's the state of mind that's causing that ripple? Is it a state of clear, empathetic, enthusiastic awareness? Or are you still caught up in need and fear that's all based on this illusion of division, that's all based on this fiction that you are not already whole and complete? All right. So all of a sudden, instead of focusing on how's it all going to end up, you have to focus just on the quality of the step that you're on, because that is what's going to influence the impact of the ripple. You don't get to know how, but you do get to know through time and experience and watching without any preference whatsoever that it really is the quality of your awareness and the level of your presence that changes the impact of the ripple. It's not about doing the right thing, because that changes from moment to moment to moment. And only present awareness allows you to feel with sensitivity what your decisions truly are, rather than what your decisions used to be based on old fears and old needs.
Yeah, because the more you sink in to that experience, like the more context you gain, the 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 better the decision is gonna be. And again, it's not like the good or bad thing, but the more context you gain, the more informed all of your actions are gonna be. The more sensitive you are, the less distortion you're experiencing through trying to judge a situation or trying to find certainty. Like, the desire for certainty takes a lot of energy out of us. Like, out of our attention sort of pie here, desire for certainty takes a big chunk of that. Like, we strive for that, we try and find it, we think it's possible, and so it takes away from the depth of how attentive we can be to the experience. And again, that's not gonna get you to the correct decision or the right decision, but it's gonna get you a lot closer than not paying as much attention, than being lost in thought and trying to find the certainty and conceptual ideas of how it's going and judging the situation. So there is no way to get to that objective certainty of correct, right or wrong, correct or incorrect, but there is a way to get closer, and it's through paying attention and being sensitive to the situation without your preconceived notion of what that is, without your idea of the other person. We were talking before about our ideas of other people, and it's what allows us to get caught off guard. Like, if you're not maintaining an idea of someone else, there's no way to get caught off guard, because you're not on guard thinking about them in a specific way, thinking that you could possibly know them. And so that's what allows you to keep paying attention. So when you get caught off guard by someone, you're like, "Oh, you're not who I thought you were." Like, correct. I was never who you thought I was, but you settled upon it, and then you got caught off guard, as opposed to understanding that you can't actually know me. You can't actually conceptually come to an idea of me. The idea, whatever idea you have of us right now on the screen, isn't us. It's not it. And your willingness to remain uncertain will allow you to continue paying very, very close attention to the situation at hand, and that's the only way to know someone, is in the moment, in the experience that you're having as you're interacting with them. It's not the idea you've held on to, built based upon a couple experiences that you had with them, a couple interactions that you had with them. But we don't like that. We don't like not knowing. Our mind doesn't like not knowing. So we settle upon something, and that's what allows us to get caught off guard.
Exactly. Wow. This has been a fantastic discussion slash episode of Dualistic Unity Social. I just want to throw a QR code up here and just let everybody know that we're going to be taking a short break, and then we're going to be continuing in 15 minutes at 6 p.m. Eastern Time for our call-in show, which means that if you would like to, you can actually join us on the screen. You can do so with video or without. Totally up to you. And you can ask a question, share a story, share an insight, air a grievance, disagree with us, whatever it is that you would like to do. We just enjoy the conversations. We do limit people to 10 minutes, though, just so we can make sure everybody has a chance to call in. But if you can join us, we would love to see you. Andrew, man, this has been a blast. I'm really enjoying this new interface. And of course, this new series of Dualistic Unity Social. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm going to pass it to Andrew to wrap us up, and we'll see you in 15 minutes.
Yeah, looking forward to the call-in show. If you're pissed off about any that last video I posted, definitely come chat with us. But yeah, this interface is awesome. I like the mics are so much better on here, I'm sure. So yeah, looking forward. And even if you're not angry with us, if you want to just come chat and share some stuff and share some insights, like Colin Show is a great spot, and it becomes a podcast episode. So if you want to be on our podcast, you don't have to be a guest. You can just join the Colin Show. And if you're interested, yeah, we'll be there in 15 minutes for an hour or 45 minutes. So
And
hope to
then
see some of you there.
there's a 90-minute group after that on Patreon. QR codes on there, patreon.com/dualistic unity. If you don't want to be on an episode, but you do want to talk to us, we do groups 5 days a week. We'd love to see you there.
All right. Bye, everyone.